Well, good evening, everybody. It is Wednesday. Wait, Wednesday? You're hearing us on a Wednesday? Well, we've decided to throw some lists into the middle of your week so you can get over the midweek doldrums and
Clearly, it's so you can plan for your weekend.
absolutely. And who are we to help you with that? Well, I'm Josh, and I am joined as always by a ghost microphone and my lovely and talented list partner, Jen.
Oh, we have a trio today. We've got the Ghost, Jen, and Josh. This is super cool. It's going
The
to be a good
ghost likes
list.
to crank up the volume on my mic for no reason whatsoever. See?
It's okay. We'll give him special residual credits at the end.
Well, this week we have, I think, a very special list, a list that is sure to make some people very upset because, after all, you hear all the time, everyone's making everything these days. Oh my God, why nobody has any original ideas? And these lists are all about things that should be adapted or remade. Remade well, I should say. Maybe give us a better version of the adaptation that they were going for. And I think my list is a banger. How about you, Jen?
So I have to say that I actually had a really hard time with this list. Um, Partly because there are a billion movies. Just for background and foundation, I am a former film student. I went to this was actually one of our projects when I was in film school, was to choose. We had five movies that we thought that we could do better, and why. And of course, my filmmaking, my I'll just call them my professor. My professors basically shot down every single idea and said, "That's ridiculous. Think about what you're saying before you say it." It really made me think critically about a lot of the things that are on this list because, of course, I could not do better. But as a viewer, man, I really hope that some of these get chosen to be done better because they're all awesome ideas. So I had a good time putting this list together, but it was not easy. I really had to think about it. And The Little Mermaid was not on my list, by the way.
Well, funny story when it comes to putting this list together. I've had several iterations of it, and I finalized it approximately 25 minutes ago.
Oh, wow. Hot take, the biggest surprise of this whole list is I don't have a single Nicolas Cage movie on my list.
They're all
Not a single
perfect.
one. Oh boy. Okay.
I'm a
So,
cat. I'm a sexy cat.
I really thought there would be at least one, but no, no.
I
No.
did have Nicolas Cage on my mind too as I was going through this.
It's
And,
so
and
funny.
strangely enough, nope, did not make the list. But since I started off last week about ladies first this time, Jen, start us off with your number
Okay.
10.
My number 10 is it's a little bit of a tired trope. But only it's a tired trope only I think because we haven't quite gotten it down right. There was a movie back in 2007 called In the Name of the King, a Dungeon Siege Tale. And it's a hot take on Dungeons and Dragons, and I have to say that every time I watch a Dungeons and Dragons movie, I realize that the writers, directors, and producers never actually played Dungeons and Dragons, and they know nothing. Jon Snow. They are just looking at source material, taking it out of context, and not getting what makes the worlds so awesome and fun. And In the Name of the King really started out with like a good idea, but there was nothing about this movie that was relatable or worked in the setting that it was in, despite the fact that it starred Jason Statham, John Rhys Davies, Ray Liotta. I mean, like it had everything that it needed to succeed, but the execution was so bad. Now, the reason that I think that this should be remade is because Stranger Things picked up the Dungeons and Dragons thread and said, hey, let's weave an epic around this idea. And I think if we approached that same thematic concept with this, it could work. It could totally work. The story is good. The execution is terrible. Also, it's 2022. It's not 2007 anymore. We have better green screen technology and we have amazing practical effect pieces that I think could really lend itself to making this movie good. So, number 10, In the Name of the King, a dungeon siege tale.
Now, I haven't seen this movie, but I have heard of it. So we're already off to a good start.
Hmm.
I do want to add,
Josh, do you
though,
play Dungeons and Dragons? I just have to ask.
uh, no, I'm not a nerd.
Okay. Well, I
I
do play
play
Dungeons and Dragons.
White Wolf games. Werewolf the Apocalypse, Vampire the Masquerade.
Oh, okay.
See, it's cooler.
That's enough. I mean, I do those too. So, I mean, yeah. I got some RPG love going on
Although,
here. This is good.
if I'm being honest, I haven't played any of them in decades because, they involve knowing people. And I
Yes.
try not to do that for the most part. But Marvel is coming out with a tabletop RPG. It's already in, I guess, beta, kind of a pre-release mode. They have the rule book available online, but
Oh, that sounds
sometime
like
within
fun.
the next year, they're going to be releasing the physical version of the rule book and finalizing all of the stuff that you need to play the game. And I'm thinking, you know what, the kids and I might really enjoy that.
Yeah, that could be a lot of fun. That could be a lot of fun.
I'm really psyched for that.
So, what's your number 10?
Well, my number 10 is the beginning of a theme that's going to last throughout my list, and it's childhood. Things that were made when I was younger that I want to see them done justice. And for my number 10 spot, it is a remake of the 1995 film based on the 1980 book, The Indian in the Cupboard.
Oh, that's a really good story.
Especially through, all 5 books? Was it 5?
I think.
What we have is a kind of a night at the museum before there was a night at the museum, right? These things that Omri puts into his cupboard are brought to life, and he talks to and forms friendships with essentially his toys. Um, and there's a bond that's developed there, especially like I said, it goes on over 5 books. Now, I'm not knocking Frank Oz for what he did in his movie. It was less than stellar, I'll be honest. And because the stories hold such a high place in my heart, I would like not only to see a good adaptation of Indian in the Cupboard, I want to see someone take the reins for the full series and really milk that cash cow for what it's worth. Okay,
Yeah, that could be good.
I have an affinity, like I said, for love for the characters, and I just want to see it done well. That's going to be a running theme, stuff from my childhood that I want to see done well.
Hmm.
But Indian in the Cupboard's my number 10. Omri, Little Bear, give them to me.
I love that concept, by the way. It's one of my favorite concepts.
Threatening movie makers?
No, the concept of a beloved sort of a way to make the things that we cherish come to life.
Mhm.
I'm a huge Velveteen Rabbit fan. I'm a huge fan of um, Toy Story. You know, things that we declare as inanimate, but clearly our love, attention, and just our attention. That there can be something supernatural around that brings it to life. It's a very cool idea. So that was good.
Thunder
Good choice.
Buddies.
Good choice. Um, Changing the mood completely for my number 9. I went with, and this was a hard one for me because I don't dislike the movie that was made necessarily, but I vehemently disagree with the way that it was made because it condenses a story that is really rich and big and doesn't do the characters the kind of justice that I feel like they really need in order to love this the way that I did. And you know, full disclosure, I'm sure anybody who knows me knows that I am a huge book snob. So I mean, I read everything. And if you give me, it doesn't matter what it is, I read and read and read and read and read. And I sometimes go through author jags where I just read one author, and no matter what they've written, I'm like, yeah, I'm all over it. And I went through this with an author named Patrick O'Brien, who wrote a series called, well, I guess I shouldn't say the whole series, but basically the movie was Master and Commander: Far Side of the World. It's based on a series of books about a ship captain named Lucky Jack. Jack Aubrey is the ship captain, and it's set during the Napoleonic War, which is one of my favorite times in history to study. There is so much going on there. In fact, this also ties in with my choice number 1, which will be interesting. But the things that we're missing out of this, which I feel like if only they could do an adaptation that allows for the characters to kind of breathe instead of being stuck into this very fast paced not even episodic, almost like a mini saga inside of the movie. It felt incredibly rushed while they were trying to tell a massive saga story. And because of that, none of the characters really got to shine. And I feel like we missed out a lot. So that is my number 9 choice. Again, I thought Russell Crowe and Paul Bettany did a phenomenal job of doing what they did with what they had, but the adaptation needed a little bit more TLC. It also, let's face it, Master and Commander really needed a little bit more attention to the details that mattered. And then they chose to do some things. They chose to focus on some things that I think didn't need to be focused on. So that's my choice. Not, I would love to see this redone, but like you, I'm not gonna knock the original. I'm glad that it exists in some form, but I really feel like it could have been way better.
Master and Commanded. Master.
Yes.
You know, that was the first movie that I ever saw that left me walking out of a theater going, you know, I cannot knock the craftsmanship of this film. It
Mm.
is beautiful in almost every conceivable way. My only problem with it was it seemed like we were jumping into the middle of the story.
We were. We were. And that, I think that that is why I have such a problem with the adaptation. If we had started with Jack Aubrey in his first command, or if we had started even with a small vignette at the beginning, you know, with understanding just a tiny bit of his history, I feel like it would have been so much better. But they chose to focus on the relationship between the doctor and the captain. And while that was good and definitely the meat of some of the later books by Patrick O'Brien, it didn't really give viewers the chance to get to know these characters in the intimate function that I think they serve in the book. It just missed the mark. But you're right. I mean, honestly, in terms of production values, damn, that it was amazing, truly amazing.
Love the cinematography for that movie.
Yeah.
So I guess it's my number 9. My
Your
number
number
9.
9.
My number 9. Also a movie that's been made before, and also has a setting involving lots of water. No, it's not Master Commander.
I hope it's not Waterworld.
No,
Oh, good. Oh, phew. Okay.
it is Sphere.
Oh.
You see, in the 90s, there was this movie called Jurassic Park. And, it's weird. The 90s were a very good time for Michael Crichton because we got Congo, we got Rising Sun, we got Jurassic Park. Um, and Jurassic Park was great. And Congo, it was all right. Rising Sun, okay. But Sphere, my personal favorite book by Michael Crichton, did not leap from the pages to the screen for me.
No, it really didn't.
I noticed, and this is me as a kid, noticing that, wow, the book and the movie, they're so different. We're missing a lot of nuance with the characters. We're missing a lot of great reveals. And I'm not going to be insulting to Barry Levinson, but come on, with such a cast, with such good material, this should have been, a hole in one, easy adaptation. But somewhere along the way, things got lost in translation. The story was all jacked up, and I want to see my favorite Michael Crichton story brought to life on the big screen with a great cast and given my way. If somebody said blank check, this is your property now, you are the producer now, that kind of thing. I'm thinking, let's it pains me to say this, especially due to recent activities, but I would say let's see what James Cameron can do with it.
Oh, yeah.
There's a guy that knows characters, there's a guy that knows special effects, and I think he's the guy. And let's not forget his affinity for just, I like to make cameras for water. I'm not sure if James Cameron really sounds like that. I'm just kind of throwing that out there. Um, but in case you're unfamiliar with what Sphere is, it's about a group of scientists that get taken down to the bottom of the ocean, essentially, in this lab where a craft is discovered. And while they're down there, a lot of strange things start happening. And the ones responsible for them, the ones responsible for freaking everybody out and coming after the scientist, isn't always who you think it is.
It's a better version of the Abyss.
Yeah, yeah,
It really is. It's
definitely.
it's a better story. But the
Especially with
Abyss
the
was actually
reveals.
done better. I would watch the Abyss over Sphere any day.
I would watch. Um, what's another? And I'd watch Waterworld over Sphere.
Underwater was not super well received, but even it was better than Sphere. So, yeah, there's that.
I would watch The Meg over Sphere.
Hey, I would watch The Meg over a lot of movies because who doesn't love a giant shark? And that last. No, I can't. I can't. No.
You're right.
Okay.
That was
Anyway,
unfair. Number 8.
we'll just agree to watch Jaws and we'll go from there. Okay. So I am going to tell you about my number 8 and introduce it by saying that in 2013 there was a horror short called Lights Out, and it won a bunch of film challenge awards, and it was really clever. It basically, the whole premise of this very simple short, which is like, I don't know, 2 minutes, is the person turns off the light and they see things that you can't see when the light's on. You just can't see them. They don't exist, it seems. And each time they turn off the light, whatever it is that is there moves closer to them. And it eventually, and I can't now, I can't remember if the short actually has this or not, but eventually, in the end, you get the reveal of what actually was in the shadow, and it's spooky. It's a super spooky kind of, jump. Very, very, very well executed. Very well done. Just the a really brilliant idea. Okay, well, in 2016, uh, a whole bunch of very famous people signed on as executive producers, including James Wan, and said, "Okay, well, let's give this a go and see what we can do." And oh my God, they diluted the idea of what Lights Out to basically be a story that doesn't even feel like it has any. It feels like everything that was good about Lights Out, they took out and said, well, let's just replace it with this, and we'll just use the gimmick of when you turn out the light, that's when you know that they're there. And it didn't make any sense. It didn't pay any homage to the actual short. It didn't have any of the scariness. It just felt like it was every other really silly tropey horror movie that I've ever seen. It didn't, I mean, half of it didn't even make sense. And I always felt really bad about that and thought, if a very amateur filmmaker can create a very scary scenario in less than 3 minutes on screen, why is it that when you give people millions and millions of dollars and an epic amount of time to tell a story, they can't recreate that? It baffles me to no end. So my number 8 pick is Lights Out. I think that it could be done as a supernatural horror with all of the really good parts of making it scary while leaving out all of the ridiculous tropey parts and not involving the characters in such an intimate level with what the supernatural is. I mean, we find out in Lights Out, although I won't spoil it for you, but we do find out in Lights Out that there is a very specific reason that the thing that is in the shadows is just connected to one of the characters. And it's like that takes away all the spookiness of it. I'm supposed to be scared when I turn out the lights in my own room, not, well, that's not going to happen to me because I'm clearly not that character and that stuff never happened to me. It just, it, it wasn't scary. So that's my number 8 pick.
I think you're right as far as money and especially horror films go, because I it's my at least personal opinion that horror movies aren't scared. There's like this curve, right? That like the more money you have, the less scary it gets because you're
Yeah.
depending on more on CGI special effects rather than setting the right atmosphere. And
You
atmosphere is
know,
everything.
and if I could just interject one that I think actually does work, even though not everybody, was like scared by it, but it works in its nuance, was It Follows. It Follows was scary in the inception of what was really going on, and it didn't require a ton of jump scares, and it didn't require, it was so incredibly atmospheric, and the performances carried the movie. Not I'm not saying that if you go to watch a slasher that you shouldn't be entreated to lots of slasher stuff, but when it comes to genuine suspense horror, a supernatural horror piece, it's atmosphere and mood that make all the difference. And I don't
Hmm.
really understand why there's that disconnect, but a number of movies have suffered from that recently. So that is my Lights Out. Is if you get a chance to see it, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. But we could do it better. We could totally do it better.
So my number 8, going back to my theme here. In 1990, a book was released, and I realized now that when I read it, it was a brand new book. It was assigned to us in third grade, and it was the first time that I found a chapter book that I can consider my favorite book. And you know what? Once a year, I read it to this day.
Is it Lord of the Rings?
No, no. I don't think that was published in 1990.
Oh, that's right. Sorry.
It is Jerry Spinelli's Maniac McGee.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's funny because I was talking to no, it was on a Facebook chat in the movie addiction group, and I said I want to see this made into a movie. How come no one's made it? And I was told it was made into a movie in 2003. It's like,
I
wait,
missed that
what?
too.
What? How did I miss? I have to watch that now. And then I looked it up, and it's like a Nickelodeon made-for-TV movie.
Oh no.
This will not stand. So somebody call Robert Zemeckis. Tell him unlimited money, although it won't take a big budget, to tell the story about a runaway kid that befriends a lot of people in a segregated town and kind of makes this mythos for himself completely unintentionally just by showing up and being a decent person and helping out whenever he could. Yeah, there's a little bit of drama. Yeah, there's a lot of racial tension between the characters, but you know what? Considering the times, I think this is, if it a film that were made, could be a message a lot of people need to see if it's done well.
Yeah. I could see this actually being a really good animated drama as well. You could really do a lot if you made this animated.
I think so too. Most importantly, though, I just want a good version of this to watch. It's not going to replace me reading the book annually, because if I had my camera on, you could see it on my bookshelf, and it's a story that I've passed down to my kids uh, over the years. And Jeffrey Lionel McGee, the boy that's allergic to pizza, the boy that can untie any knot, fastest kid in town. It's a story that needs to be done. And that's why it's my number 8.
I'm going to take just one quick pause here to say that on this list would have been up until about a month ago, um, Sandman, inside of its entirety by Neil Gaiman, and so I say that because there's a lot. Part of the reason that some of these movies get made and then they're never seen again is obviously because of intellectual property rights that get sold back and forth between different either production houses or development companies, and I think that sometimes we forget that original content is it's much more difficult to bring to market. But when we're talking about books, you know, there's a really good chance that a book can make it to a movie if it hasn't had a screenplay adaptation or if it hasn't had any other intellectual property purchases on it. And so a lot of the stuff that we're talking about right now, obviously, it already has strong intellectual property rights attached to them, so they probably won't get remade the way that we want them to be remade, which is part of the interesting part of this list. But a movie like that, really could succeed because we know that most of the intellectual property rights that used to exist over at Nickelodeon are they have been sold off quite a bit. So that one seems like it might have a good chance.
Well,
Just throwing it out there as an
the
optimistic note.
the Discovery WB fiasco is certainly a fiasco. So
Yes.
maybe if we pull together our money and buy WB, we can use some of that weight behind the name Warner Brothers to get something done.
Uh, is there any weight behind? No, okay, that's a different show. We'll talk about that another time. Okay. So my number 7. Speaking of franchises and intellectual property rights, this one, um, damn. The intellectual property rights on this has gone all over the place, and the first movie is kind of a cult classic. It's not particularly well done, but it's particularly well loved. I am talking about Highlander. The first Highlander, everybody loved that. I mean, it was just kind of an instant like moment. Had music by Queen, swords, Sean Connery. I mean, I don't know how you go wrong. And of course, they wanted to capitalize on the Highlander. Hey, everybody loves this. Let's do something else. And they made Highlander 2, which was abysmal. And I mean, like, I struggle with this movie. Uh Connor McLeod loses his immortality. Basically, he gives it up, but it's it's such a weird idea. It doesn't even actually work if you believe the lore of the first movie. Like, you have to really reach into the archives of, yeah, I can just check out of my brain for a couple minutes while I'm watching this part of the movie so that I can just forget everything that I thought was right. No. Um the reason that I think that this would make the reason I would want to see it as a better done screenplay, a better done adaptation, is because there was a lot to be said about the Highlanders as we moved forward. There's a whole lore that exists around Highlander, including extraterrestrial entities. It's just absolutely phenomenal how big this lore is. And Highlander 2 set the stage for every Highlander that came after it, which kind of mired it in this ridiculousness. The this idea of the Highlander having to somehow have like some kind of geopolitical pull, and they moved away from what actually made it good, which was swashbuckling immortals battling for the soul of, well, not just the prize, but even more than that. I mean, the status, the everything. It it stops working when you try to throw mythos into current political scenery. It stops being exciting and it starts to feel like you are preaching to us. And so Highlander 2 actually came out in 1991, but it felt preachy. It felt awful. And it didn't even. I hated Connor McLeod in this movie. I hated him, and I don't hate the character Connor McLeod, but I hated this. So my pick for number 7 is Highlander 2: The Quickening. I think that if we went back and we redid that movie, we could redefine the entire Highlander franchise, and it really might be great.
You know, they really shot themselves in the foot by not remembering the one rule:
There can be only one.
there can be only one.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, that's all spot on. As far was it Highlander 2 where they were like counting the bullets that were.
Oh my god. It was it was supposed to kind of like be sort of post-apocalyptic, but crime is everywhere. But the thing that really disturbed me was it's an aging Connor McLeod who basically gave up his immortality. And it didn't make any sense that he gave up his immortality, and it also didn't make any sense to me the convenient way that he actually traps it back. It's like yes, I know you want to do the battle so that you can have him have a stake in being immortal, but how about just not making him not immortal in the first place and struggle with something else? Because that feels better than taking a beloved character and basically turning him into a homeless person and asking us to accept the fact that he went from being the one to the nothing. It was just terrible. But I really do love this franchise. It's one of my favorite franchises.
Will decapitate for food.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, my number seven, still going on this childhood train here. Full disclosure, I didn't even know there was a movie adaptation of this till like 5 minutes ago. So, needless to say, I have not seen the film adaptation. But I'm pretty sure it's no good. In 1978, Ellen Raskin released a book called The Westing Game. It was my first whodunit as a kid and got me into not necessarily detective stories, but a good mystery. And it was one that was geared towards kids. It's got a kid in there that's smarter than all the adults, basically. And in 1997, it was made into a film called Get a Clue. And from the looks of it, it is another one of those TV movie deals on one of the kids' networks. I didn't bother looking that up because, like I said, it doesn't look good. But essentially, I would love to see not necessarily a serious version of this done, but at least a version where the person behind the camera is serious about delivering a good story. There are a lot of good, interesting twists and turns about the residents of the Sunset Towers as they're trying to figure out who killed Samuel Westing and the game that unfolds as they figure out what happened and who is going to get the inheritance.
Hmm.
Now, are you familiar with the story?
I am actually.
Uh, these were how do I describe it? I mean, it was like a Knives Out before Knives Out. It's a Murder on the Orient Express, and because we are in either the beginning stages or the middle of getting more and more um, mysteries into production, I think this one has legs to it, and quite frankly, um, for the Gen X millennial, age range, it's a property that we should all be pretty familiar with and something we could take the kids to.
I have a kind of a soft spot for Agatha Christie adaptations and as such movies and content that revolve around that kind of story. And one of the things that I noticed about Knives Out that people loved was it was really hard to tell who did it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there is another way to go with this, which is it is just as cool to tell us who did it and then watch it unravel because it does still feel like there are high stakes. And I think that either way you could tell this story and it would totally work. The adaptation could revolve around either narrative element. It I can totally see that this would make a great movie. I mean, a better movie because like I haven't seen that movie either. Um, but I can see that the story would make a really great movie if told one of those two ways.
I think so too. I'm fairly positive that it's the movie is that was made is a lot of typical late 90s, kids are the greatest kind of jokes and whatnot, a
Yeah.
la Blank Check, you know, things like that. Whereas I would say, you know what? Let's get Edgar Wright to do this upright. No pun intended.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. All right. Okay, so again, our lists so far are very varied, I will say. This is, I think, one of the most varied lists that we probably will ever come up with, because the theme is so broad, but also because our interests really shine through here.
Hmm.
Um I'm huge with the Godzilla versus everything idea. I love Godzilla movies. I've always loved Godzilla movies. Every time, in fact, one of my favorite movies to watch on a Saturday if I'm not feeling good or whatever is Godzilla versus Mothra. And it has this very special sort of nostalgia in my head. It was one of the first monster movies that I ever saw. Absolutely, really loved it. And ever since then, my quest to watch every Godzilla movie ever done has led me down some very dark paths and, ridiculous, Son of Godzilla. But still, it just holds a really special place in my heart because they're, even when they're terrible, they're still amazing. Okay. And then came Cloverfield. I have to take a slightly dramatic pause here to say Cloverfield was everything a Godzilla movie should never be. It didn't just disappoint from the monster aspect, and you can yell at me all day that it wasn't supposed to be the monster reveal, that it was supposed to be all of the things that made people scared and as they were running through the city. But any movie that makes me seasick as I'm sitting in a theater is not gonna fly with me, number one. I mean, they took shaky cam to the most epic of epics. And not only that, but it didn't actually make me any more or less scared. It made me super annoyed that I couldn't see what was happening. Like, it didn't make me feel like, oh, I can't see what's happening, that's spooky. It made me annoyed that everything was out of focus and not even discernible. The lighting was terrible. Everything about this movie just didn't work. The story was good. I mean, this could have been an amazing Godzilla reveal story, like a real true horror story of what it is when Godzilla is first making his appearance into a city. The sort of like the pre stuff that goes with it. Are there lesions of like little, creepy crawly things that accompany Godzilla on his journey? That could totally be amazing. I mean, he's a radioactive creature from the bottom of the ocean. Who knows what gets attracted to him? And does that come up on land when he comes on land? I mean, all of the themes were here to make this epic, and it failed so bad because it really didn't even concentrate on what I think would have made it the most scary. It was kind of a rescue mission. It was, hey, there's something really bad happening in the city and we don't understand what it is. But even the communications blackout didn't make any sense because n- the recording aspect of this didn't make any sense. Just everything about this movie was stuck in, here's a great idea, and then it's kind of like they gave it to somebody in the, here's really poor execution department and made a movie out of it. I can't tell you how disappointed I was in this movie, but how much I really wanted this movie to be amazing. And I chose this movie over King Kong versus Godzilla, although it was a tough call, because at least in King Kong versus Godzilla, although still, epic monsters, lots of things didn't make sense, it was big, and it felt big, and it felt environmentally like there's something massive happening here. the close the decision to make this movie, the Cloverfield movie, about just the people who are in panic in the city didn't translate well at all. So even though we know it's a Godzilla movie from the very end, uh nothing about this movie made it feel like there was anything at stake other than this was a natural disaster. So that is my number 6 pick.
But that 10 Cloverfield Lane, huh?
Not 10 Cloverfield Lane. I don't even want that to be remade. I would just like to actually forget it.
Okay,
But
okay.
I would absolutely, if I had money, if I had cash in my pocket right now, I would totally give it to somebody to say, "Hey, let's do Cloverfield again." That could be great.
You
I
know,
don't, by the way. But
I don't even hate that idea. I Cloverfield, I think, like a lot of found footage movies, or it was, at the end, you get to the end and you're like, oh, well, I guess that was the movie. Okay.
see, it could have been great, and you didn't need to reveal that it was Godzilla throughout the movie. You just needed a cohesive story around it.
Hmm.
The rescue is the problem. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. There's not enough narrative to pull it together. And so even the scary parts don't really make you scared. Yeah.
Somebody buy that guy a tripod.
Oh my god. I know what they were trying to do. I mean, you get the idea. Okay, it's found footage. But, there's found footage and then there's just so it's overboard. It's like it's not there's no reason for it to be as bad as it was. So,
You know, a way that could be done today is just from a perspective of the filmmaker. Instead of saying, "Oh, we found this one camera with this one bit of footage," you say that someone in the government, right, has gotten access to everybody's cloud accounts. Because of
mm,
Monster, we have to collect as much data as possible. So they
right.
access everybody's Google, clouds and iClouds and all that, and they pull a bunch of different footage to kind of piece together what's going on. And the the only real problem, the only thing that would make it completely unbelievable, is the fact that the filmmaker is, of course, going to want to fill that full frame, right, top to bottom.
Right.
Whereas if they were really pulling footage from people's phones and stuff, if it's really found footage, as we all know, dummies love portrait mode.
Well, but there's also the other side. Well, not the other side. There's also the other augmentation to this, which is sure, tell us a story from the cloud, but tell us the story from the cloud and make the protagonists anti-heroes in the government or anti-heroes that are trying to cash in on this found footage or try to hide it or whatever, but
Hmm.
don't give us a story about a rescue and then make it impossible to tell what the heck is going on in the rescue. I mean,
It,
like the whole central theme of this movie is something that doesn't work because there's nothing to work with. It's like it had I think it has seeds of a good idea, right? Yes, they're stuck from one side and on the other side. There are seeds of good storytelling here, but those seeds sort of like get lost in a bramble of weeds, and there isn't any way to kind of pull it back. You can't find where you were going with this without significantly changing the big narrative. So, and like I said, I love my Godzilla movies. This one just no, didn't do it.
can I make a really quick pitch?
Yeah.
Okay, how about this? Government official, low level security guy, right? His task is to go through all of the footage of the Cloverfield incident, and he finds, I don't know, Maybe it's a girl, maybe it's a guy. It's 21st century. Who cares? But he finds somebody that he finds interesting, finds intriguing. So he starts finding, you know, through timestamps and whatnot, all of this footage focusing on this one person because he has to know what happens to them,
Right.
and that's the narrative.
See, I like that. That actually works. And then you can get into, some conspiracy theories even. Is the NSA really caching all of our data? I mean, there's all these like little Easter eggs that you could throw into a movie concept like that doesn't work if you are telling a straightforward narrative of just, and I have seen found footage done well. I mean, Ghost Encounters, was it called? Ghost Encounters? I forgot. I think it's called Ghost Encounters. But there's a movie where they go to this asylum, and the found footage part of it is actually really good. Like Grave Encounters. I'm so sorry, Grave Encounters. And it's epic. It's absolutely stellarly done because the narrative works all the way through. In Cloverfield, and this is another example of a movie that had millions and millions of dollars to play with, and they chose to focus on the least amount of story that they possibly could. It's so bizarre. Never understood it.
It's an expensive movie that looks like it was made cheap.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yes. What were they spending their money on? Dampeners for the lights?
It was all
Guys.
marketing.
Oh, goodness gracious. So, yeah. So, we're in the middle of the list.
Let's see. I'm on my number 7, number 6,
You're on your
number
number
6,
6? Yep.
number 6. Okay, my number 6. Once again, going along the same themes of books I read as a kid. Also printed in 1990. This one is called. This one is called. Mute my phone.
Huh.
This one is called "Losing Joe's Place" by Gordon Gorman.
Oh.
Are you familiar?
No, I'm actually not. It's intriguing though.
Well, it's called "Losing Joe's Place." It's about these three teenagers, um, Jason, Don, and Ferguson, and Jason's brother Joe lets them kind of live in his apartment for the summer. They're teenagers, but they have to get jobs and take care of the place essentially. And the story revolves around it begins as Joe comes back and he's like, "You got me evicted."
Oh no.
So they kind of tell you up front things are going to happen, and they do. So the story is going through how they get Joe evicted, even though he's not even there.
Wow.
It's a comedy to be sure. In fact, I believe it was the first straight up comedy book that I ever read, and it's one that because of its um, hilarious situations, uh, the highs, the lows, and the fact that it's super Canadian.
Mm.
I would love to see this made into, make it for streaming. Anything. Just I want to see a good version of this as a movie. And that's my number 6.
Nice. That does sound good. I like it a lot. Um so my number 5 is a book that was published recently. Doesn't really, it's not too recent, but because 2015 is actually not recent, although it feels like that should only be 5 years ago. I don't know. um it is by a person named Francis Hardinge. The book is called The Lye Tree. uh the Lye Tree is a small tree, and it only thrives if you tell it a lie, and then it bears fruit. And interestingly enough, it well, okay, let me say it better. The fruit of the tree, when you eat it, delivers a hidden truth to the person who consumes it. But the tree grows when you tell it a lie. And the bigger the lie, the more people will believe the hidden truth that the tree bears. So the girl who finds out the secrets to the lie tree discovers that she's really good at lying. And she's able to manipulate the truths from the tree in a way that is quite interesting as she's trying to uncover the murder of someone. It's it is definitely a young adult book, but it is absolutely an easy adaptation for an adult market. The concept is brilliant, and I feel like this is one of those movies that it's so straightforward in its basic aspect that everything that you put around it would just be delicious garnish, truly delicious. Um it could be absolutely beautiful or it could be absolutely terrifying depending upon which way you want to go with it. I highly recommend the book, but I this is one of the few books that I can remember reading and seeing the movie unfold in front of my eyes. I mean, I always have visual images of what I read. I'm always sort of immersed in whatever the fantasy is that I am reading at the moment, even if it's nonfiction. But this book in particular, really, I could see the whole thing. I could see scene by scene by scene how to make this work. And it was really exciting. So that is my number five pick. I really think that this could be an amazing story told for visual content.
Sorry, I was looking that book up, and I am. Yeah, I just bought it.
It's intriguing, right? It's such a good idea. It's so the author, the way that they express this transmutation, if you will, of the lie into this hidden truth is so genius, and it truly consumes the world. So again, the more the tree is thriving, that tells you that the lies are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's a lot of consequences that go along with it. But if you're doing something for a noble cause, like trying to solve a murder, you feel justified in your, well, a little harm now will give me a lot of good later. So it creates a kind of moral quagmire that you have to slog through. And I have to say that for young adult literature, it hits all of the right points. And again, as an adaptation, this could be just absolutely amazing. So that's my pick.
Like I said, I not only want to see this. After that description, I went to thriftbooks.com and ordered it immediately.
Nice, nice. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about it.
Oh, I'll give you a book report.
And I think you should actually have one of your kids read it too, because I guarantee that they will love it. Absolutely love it.
I promise you. As soon as it gets here and I crack it open, one of my kids is going to be like, huh, that's mine now.
Okay, I can't wait to hear.
Then I guess it's time
So,
to me to crack the top five.
yes, now you are in the top 5 as well.
Well, this is uh, my last selection for something that's already been made, and much like one of your earlier choices with the Highlander, there's a certain group of people that have an affinity for the movie that was made, but
Hmm.
I'm not one of them.
Uh-oh.
You see, a long time ago, Stephen King wrote under the name Richard Bachman. And one of his stories was adapted into a film starring Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, we're off to a good start.
The thing is, the movie barely resembles the story at all, and it was The Running Man. That's right. The futuristic game show about trying to stay alive was the movie got rid of all of the major themes of the story in the book.
It did. You're right.
And it also, I will say, gave us a very tiny scale version of how the game's played out in the book. What I want to see is the national manhunt. I want to see the hunters go out, and I want to see the really crappy ending. Well, the ending of the Running Man, the ending of the Running Man, is not a happy one.
No.
And I want to see it in all of its hold my intestines in through, gut shot glory. Because The Running Man is a dirty story. It's a dystopian future, although technically it takes place in roughly 3 years, and quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised to see, an actual manhunt be primetime television in 3 years. Just seems the direction we're kind of going in. But no, go ahead.
I was just going to comment that this is also sort of interesting for another reason. Although I can think of 5, 6, 7 right off the bat Stephen King novels that I would love to have seen done better because they were done so badly. Not one of the Stephen King stories made it to my list, but The Running Man actually is, I think, a story that it was told so badly in a sort of in a what's a good way to describe this? In a late 80s uh in a late 80s push to sensationalize a lot of things. This movie sort of followed like a whole queue of movies that did the same thing. And it was bombastic. I mean, Richard Dawson as the host, absolutely perfect. I mean, it really did work, but it was terrible in its overall representation of what the source material really is about. Um, and I think you're absolutely right. I think that this is one of those movies that could 100% be told today with a quick take, a hot take on where we are as a society right now, because it really is fitting. Like it works better almost now than it did before, especially with the rise of the reality TV show, which we didn't really have back then to the same degree that we do now. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I mean, other than Richard Dawson, is anything about The Running Man good? Comparatively speaking to the story?
No. Not I couldn't even say the special effects were good.
It is a completely bastardized version of what King wrote. And someone needs to take this. Oh, that's right. I did have my director and star picked out for this one, as I do for the rest of my top 5. So imagine this. It's dark, it's gritty. It's telling the story of an everyman who chooses to go on this show to make sure his family's taken care of. Not, somebody that was wrongfully convicted, which apparently happened a lot in 80s movies. And I handpicked Dan Trachtenberg to direct, most notable for the most recent Predator movie, Prey.
Oh, yeah. Good
I want to
point.
I want to see some grime in there. I want to see this dystopian world come to life. And because the original movie had some traction based on the star, I wouldn't mind keeping with the theme of, as Vince McMahon would say, big sweaty men. But I'm going to cast somebody that actually does have some acting chops, much to the surprise of a lot of people. Dave Bautista.
Oh, good job.
I think he could be, like I said, a good everyman that's just trying to do right by his family, except, well, bad news, spoilers. And yeah, that's why it is my number 5.
The one thing I think you would have to change in The Running Man if you were going to make a proper adaptation is the ending. Instead of having him fly the plane into the tower, which I feel like you would never get away with
Yeah,
in movie
that might
telling,
be a bit.
you would have to make it more personal about just Killian and Richards together, and make it a little bit more personal. You could have them both die, but they would need to come up with a different aspect for that, because I don't think that would. It just definitely wouldn't fly. But everything else, yes, absolutely.
As long as it gets made, we can slightly alter how everybody dies.
Exactly. And you could still even have the iconic ending, which was, the explosion was tremendous, lighting up the sky like the wrath of God. You could totally do that. It just needs to be non-tower related. And I think you could totally make it work. So good choice.
That's
I like that.
absolutely
Great
fair.
choice. Okay. So my number 4 choice is a story that I'm sure everybody knows and has even been done several times over the course of movie making, and it has never once been done, I don't think, in a way that gives the book actual credit. Robert Louis Stevenson wrote a wonderful book called Treasure Island. In fact, later in the 2000s, when Black Sails was on, it capitalized on the being a prequel to Treasure Island. But if Black Sails was the prequel to Treasure Island, the world got suddenly very tame right after the events of Black Sails, because every version of this that I've ever seen has been milk toast. Just absolutely, I don't know, just not Treasure Island. Treasure Island, for everybody that doesn't know, follows the story of a couple of different characters that are involved in piracy, and they're looking for the hidden treasure of Captain Flint. There's a lot that kind of goes into that little tiny piece of backstory, but it's super important. And the part that I hate about every subsequent remake of Treasure Island is not the part where they make it feel young adult, because that's fine. I feel like Treasure Island really is kind of young adult literature. Um, it's the part where we downplay the pieces of ingenuity and conniving that these people had. And then we also give pirates and nautical stories in particular really ridiculous subplots continually. And Treasure Island is no stranger to that either. There are ridiculous subplots that go into almost every single Treasure Island movie that I've ever seen, and it just doesn't work. And the relationships between the characters always feel like they walk up to a line and then totally stop. Like, well, how good friends are you? Where does that line begin and end? Are you this person's mentor, or are you their best friend? Or is there some way in the middle of all of this that we're not seeing, that you could draw out to make it feel like Long John Silver is as conniving as he really is? It always feels like he is a caricature of himself, and that just doesn't work. It never works. Also, Long John Silver is a caricature of sort of quote unquote evil. They never really give him sort of like the chops to be misunderstood or intentionally difficult, but maybe for a reason. It's really, I don't know. Whenever I read Treasure Island, I'm always impressed again and again with Robert Louis Stevenson's with the whole story by itself. And I just every time I see it in a movie, cringe and go, I don't think that's what he had in mind. So that's my number 4 pick. I really love the story, and I would love to see an adaptation that kind of honors the truth of who those characters are. That's my feeling.
Like most things, Muppets did it best.
You know what? I totally agree. Tim Curry as Long John Silver could not have been a better character. Just truly not better. And Captain Flint, the idea that Captain Flint is like some faceless thing that then Captain Smollett is supposed to sort of be an echo of is also super interesting. I love Muppet Treasure Island. Absolutely fabulous.
Wonderful film. Well, number 4. I wish I could say I went far and wide to find this one, but nope. It's actually in the same collection as The Running Man,
Mm.
because it is another book by Stephen King as Richard Bachman, and it is called Roadwork.
Oh, road work.
Yes, Roadwork. The story of a man, as well, the book blurb, I think, says it best. His life was in the path of the wrecking ball, but he wouldn't budge. It's the story of this guy that lives in a town, and his kid had just died. His wife is, it's all like, nah. And he's basically not only losing everything about his life that he has known, due a lot of it due to this construction that they're trying to bulldoze his house for. Not only his house, but his job, the laundry. They are systematically destroying everything about his life, and there's really nothing he can do to stop it. And there's really nothing he can do to bring attention to it. Because, as they say, that's progress, right? Sometimes you got to step aside for things to advance. Except he got tired of stepping aside. And you don't really know what his plan is until, you know, the end. But the story itself, I think, is a really interesting character study about a guy that is just losing everything. And in the end, that includes his mind. So to see like a Todd Phillips, from Joker, uh, take the helm of this and really take a deep dive into Barton Dawes and bring to life the subtle nuance of basically planning the ending of yourself, uh, as kind of a final fu to the powers that be, and also a look at the powers that be themselves and how cold and different they are to the cares, the wants, the needs of the people. Because, like I said, he's just some guy. I'd say throw Adam Driver in there, let's see him go nuts, and you have not only a great movie, you have a movie that is just begging, absolutely begging to be given Oscar consideration. So that's my number 4.
Interestingly, don't confuse road work, excuse me, with Maximum Overdrive. I know a number of people who don't know the story Road Work. It's not the story of Maximum Overdrive.
No, no.
They are two very different stories. I will say that one of the moment that you start talking about road work, I immediately start thinking Arthur Dent and Don't Panic, but grab your towel, um, because the setup is so funny that it's like it it's very similar. Although there's no intergalactic whales and things like that.
Do you
Um,
promise to stay here until we get back?
but it starts out with somebody, yeah, basically they're losing or have lost in their own perception everything that was important to them.
Hmm.
I think that road work is actually one of the most one of the deepest character dives that Stephen King does, just 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 character to character. And it's very, I do think it's very interesting. I really like it a lot. So good choice, very good
Thank you,
choice.
thank you. Your number three,
um my number three is okay. Maybe this is cheating. I don't know. Tell me
probably.
if you think it's cheating. Um, okay, so I actually wrote a novel. It hasn't been published yet, but I specifically wrote this novel thinking of a screenplay. But I didn't write it as a screenplay because the moment that I try to write it as a screenplay, I realize that there's just too much to put into it. And I would actually need somebody to adapt it for me because I couldn't make those kind of executive choices about what to take out and how to rework it to fit it to a screen format. I love the story too much. It is about a mythology club. It's a group of people who get together once a month and they look at different mythology works. And I have to say that, I mean, as the geek and dork in me, this is one of those things that's like, yeah, I could totally see myself doing this. And what happens is they discover a book in the library that basically looks like every other book that's in the library, but it has a key lock on it. And the key lock is it's only unlocked using genetic code. So, long story short, it's a little bit of a time travel story. It's a lot more of the metaphor of what mythology means to us in the present day and how we have worked it so firmly into our everyday understanding of the world around us. We don't even think about it anymore. Um, and the wider analogies that mythology really gives us. I feel like the we don't do a lot of philosophical work in narrative storytelling with movies especially that involve more than the straight narrative. And I have to say the reason that I chose this as one of my on my list is because I was looking for something that I felt like had that quality to it. And I remembered that the whole reason that I wrote this in the first place was because I couldn't find it. I couldn't find an author's work that dealt with the kind of real world implications that we get from all of the world mythologies, how they work themselves into our cultures, how they work themselves into our vernacular, how we basically evolved as a society around these different kinds of belief systems. And so when I put this all together, again, the whole idea is to look at the philosophy of mythology as it applies to to our everyday world, but I gave it this supernatural piece to it to make it exciting. And who doesn't love a good time travel? That I mean, obviously, I would love to see that. I would also love to see any work that could adopt that. None of the works that we have on mythology even come close. We either go over the top and do Clash of the Titans, or we do something like that, or we do movies that kind of rework a classic take on a story, like a Helen of Troy story or a whatever it is, we don't often look retrospectively at our own world to see the amazing amounts of myth and that structure that exists in our everyday world. So that is my number 3. I'm so sorry if I cheated a little bit, but that's it. It's called the Mythology Club, by the way.
I'm not really sure how much I can chime in here, but it sounds interesting.
Do I get away with it or no?
Um, hmm, I'll allow it. Actually, I kind of wish I thought of it. Can you hear me? Hello?
Oh, I think I lost you.
No, I'm here. Let's see. Are you
Okay.
there?
Yep, I'm back. Somehow I lost. Okay.
What I said was I'll allow it, and I can't believe I have to repeat this. I'm a little jealous I didn't think of that.
Sorry.
My number 3 is not something I wrote, but it's it's I think an interesting choice because not only of the subject matter but of the director that I have on tap,
That's always a good sign.
and I think you'll understand as soon as you hear at least one or the other. So tune in next week when you find out exactly what. No,
Uh,
okay. Well, I could have easily filled this list up with different autobiographies and biographies, right?
right.
Because who doesn't love a good biopic? But this is a story of a guy that probably will never get the the recognition he deserves in the form of like a movie, and that's a crying shame. I'm talking about adapting um, cheating death, stealing life, the Eddie Guerrero story.
Oh,
Who is Eddie Guerrero,
that
you ask?
would be a good story.
Eddie Guerrero was one of the greatest wrestlers to ever lace up a pair of boots. He's also one of many in a long line of grapplers in the Guerrero family. The thing is, it's hard to believe now, but I am older than Eddie Guerrero was when he died.
Huh, that's scary.
It is. He was 38, and I think we can all agree that's just tragically young,
It is.
especially for somebody that was in the shape he was in. But maybe it's part of the business. Maybe it's a part of his less than stellar reputation from his younger days. But either way, his fart, Jesus Christ, his heart finally gave out on him. But what a lot of people don't know is his story, the things that he had to overcome, the characters that have been a part of his life, how he became the guy that lies, cheats, and steals, Eddie Guerrero, a legend in the industry.
Yeah, I
And
agree. That would be a good story. I completely agree.
now imagine telling that story through. Okay, I'm going to preface this just a little bit. For a guy like Eddie Guerrero, he was larger than life, flashy. He's out there, right?
Hmm.
And the one thing that kept going through my mind was We need a dynamic director. And the guy that came to mind was Bosler.
Oh, that's an interesting choice.
I think he could take the style of Latino Heat and Viva la Raza and make it erupt from the screen, which is, I think, fitting for a movie about the life of Eddie Guerrero. And that's
Yeah,
why it was my number three.
that's a good choice. That's a really good choice. Um, okay. My number two, probably would not come as any surprise to anyone who knew me because I regularly diss this group of movies. Um, I don't like them. I hate them. I wish that they had never been made. I would much rather just have an animated version of this story rather than the ridiculous three-part epic that these movies took up. I am talking about Peter Jackson's The Hobbit. I hate The Hobbit. I've always hated it. I can't wait to see it redone. They ridiculously put in so many storylines that didn't need
Hold
to
on.
be there.
I need to audibly gasp.
Yeah. Oh.
There we go.
I love the Lord of the Rings, and as far as I'm concerned, Peter Jackson has set the standard when it comes to Lord of the Rings. I would never diss him over those. But The Hobbit, it was absolutely terribad. Um, there are so. First of all, I guess I shouldn't say that I don't. I almost think that we don't even really need to do The Hobbit. It as a book, first of all, it stamps by itself. If you really wanted to watch a movie with The Hobbit, you could watch the Rasbanken series, the Rasbanken animated movie that is The Hobbit, and you get all the information, very condensed, but you get all the information, and you don't have any of the ridiculous confusion that is happening in this entire trilogy. But if I'm going to focus on just one movie, I'll focus on the very beginning. The very beginning of this story sets out to tell kind of an epic adventure. And what happens is you can tell that they are basically setting up two more movies instead of getting us through the material that they need to get us through. And it makes it difficult to watch. Um, there's also just with all the lore that is involved in Tolkien mythology, there is absolutely zero reason to add more, and that's what they chose to do. They chose to add different lore in order to flesh out the movie. I don't know. I'm not Fran Walsh. I'm not Peter Jackson. I wish that I had been at least listening to what their sort of ideas were about where they thought that this was going to go. But it's awful. And yeah, that takes my number two spot. And I don't even think I need to say anything more about it. I hope that they do redo something. But do they need to do three movies? No, they could just turn it into one. So there you go. There's my number two.
Well, that was very surprising.
My kid said that too, actually. You chose that? Oh my god.
I sort of don't know what to make of my world now.
You
I get
see,
where you're coming from.
you can be a fan of something and not like the delivery of something and still, have the integrity to say, okay, I wish that we could remake this and do it better. And here's some specific reasons instead of just being like, okay, well, everything was terrible. It's not that everything was terrible, it's that here's some things that I really didn't like, and here's why it bothered me, and this is why I wish that they would remake it.
It did seem weird that they were turning one book into three movies.
Yeah, I mean that was so clearly a marketing choice, and meant to kind of draw things out. But
Mhm.
even if they wanted to draw things out, even if that were the case, there were plenty of other things that they could have done that would have had just as high stakes, and they chose to invent the white orc, and it just bugs the crap out of me. I hate it. Just hate it. So
Ooh,
so
I don't
you
know.
are now at number 2.
Well, you're certain to get a little bit of fan mail for that one, and I might get a few for this one as well because it's a touchy subject.
Oh, is it the Snyderverse?
No, just cancel that.
Okay. Good man. Good man. Okay. Yes. Anyway, moving on.
You see, somebody did pitch an idea for this a little while back, and it got the green light, but then backlash came immediately, and maybe rightfully so. But I love me a good series of books, and this is one that I would love to see. I'm going to go ahead and say helmed by Steven Spielberg. I would love to see it.
Ooh.
It's called um, the overall name is called the Southern Victory series, and it's an alternate history
Oh,
where
right.
the South had won the Civil War. But the books by author Harry Turtledove are incredibly detailed, and they follow not just a sole narrative. It's each. It starts off with a book called How Few Remain, and it follows guys like General Custer and a bunch of other, a pilot, a farmer, from north and south, um, basically telling a story from as many perspectives, as it possibly can. You're getting a lot of sides here, and the the setup is we go on the presumption that the South had won the Civil War, and they want to expand to the Pacific Ocean through a land deal with Mexico. And the United States takes umbrage with the fact that soon their most, recent, we'll say, or at least most notable land rival is going to have a longer border for them to defend. So they go to war again. I'm not going to be spoiling anything, so forget that. But after the events of that, we kind of get a time jump, and for some of the characters, we check in again, um, and for some of the characters, we get like their kids' perspective, and well, their kids have grown up because the next time we check into this world, World War One's about to start, and once again, USA, CSA are basically at each other's throats because they have completely different allies.
Right.
They're still not learning to live as neighbors, so a war breaks out again. Blah blah blah. A lot of stuff happens. Now, the real crux of this is in the next part of the story. Uh, After World War One's over, and things are going back to normalcy, I guess you could say, in the divided continent. We start heading into World War II, and how, due to history being changed, um, things play out a lot differently. And the stories of each of the characters and how they are because, like I said, it tells the perspective from not only from soldiers, but civilians, farmers, um, just everyday people, and how this is all affecting the world at large. The fact that these two land masses that were once one just can't seem to get along.
Well, that doesn't sound familiar at all. But I was gonna say, David Bainoff actually pitched something like this to HBO. I don't think it was based on the same source material, but he pitched the Confederate TV series to HBO, which basically it it begins with the premise that the American Civil War ended in a stalemate, and the problem that people had with this was not that, see, from a fictional standpoint, of course, I feel like this could be really good fiction. I have actually watched The Man from Hightower, which has a very similar feel to it, with the Asian powers winning, basically they had the upper hand, and so it becomes alternate history, right? It's very interesting. I really liked it, and I like the adaptation that Netflix did with it. I mean, sorry, that Amazon did with it. But I think when it comes to the American Civil War, the problem with this isn't that we can't see another fictionalized version of what that meant, but that it is still, honestly, even 100+ years later, too close to wounds that end up feeling like you are, rightly so, exploring a kind of fan fiction for Confederates. And it doesn't feel comfortable. I think it, especially based on where we are right now as a country. So from a movie perspective or from a series perspective, although I think that that could be, it could be a good piece of fiction, it is definitely a very difficult time to try to pitch that to anybody. I feel like everybody, no matter how good your intentions were, would jump on it and go, we're not doing slavery porn, which is what a lot of times this stuff begins to sort of feel like, let's just give us all the glory of this without any of the consequences. And whether you could narrate it out, I think, in a way that would justify it or not, wouldn't take away any of the very explosive feelings that people have about it right now. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I think one
Yeah.
of the things that the story does very well is kind of compartmentalize everybody and their
Right.
motivations, because
Right.
you got your general custers that are like, it's all about glory, and you got, the everyday person where armies are rolling through their town like, we're getting killed here and we're not even in the army.
Right. Right.
So I know it's a very, very tough sell, and I can't do the pitch justice whatsoever. But I will say this: the 11 books, that's right, 11 books that um, follow this particular timeline are page turners, to say the least. Especially once you meet certain characters that, through their own actions, uh, one in particular has a tremendous rise to power, and that spells doom for a lot of people. It's
Wow.
it's just such a great series. Harry Turtledove is a wonderful author. If that doesn't fly, there's also the alternate history books where World War II is being fought in full swing, and then alien lizards attack.
I mean, that is definitely an alternate history line. Yeah. That's The Man from Hightower as an iguana.
Hmm.
Yeah. That was a really interesting story. I agree.
So we should just stick with the alien lizards then.
Yeah, I feel like it's probably a little bit more pitchable anyway.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Alien Lizards it is.
Okay, well, I'm going to launch into my number 1 because I'm super excited about this one.
Number
So
one.
with the incredibly insane awesomeness of House of the Dragon, HBO's follow-up to Game of Thrones, I am going to choose a little known but amazing book by Naomi Novik. The book is called His Majesty's Dragon. It follows one of my favorite periods of history, in case you didn't know, the Napoleonic Wars.
That's where the dragons were.
That's where the dragons were. And this story actually imagines an alternate history timeline where in the Napoleonic War, there are dragons. And
Ooh.
it is super exciting. It is absolutely, like you said, there's certain books for me that are so compelling. This is actually one of them. It marries political intrigue with a kind of structure and order that only exists kind of at sea on ships. It's very different from almost any other facet of military life. Um, and it also brings together this fantasy element that makes a person's who is who is basically so structured and so ordered, and so by the book about everything. It makes him have to put aside a lot of that in order to bond with this dragon. The dragon egg comes aboard quite by accident, really, and the person that it's supposed to go to become bonded with the dragon, some strange things happen, and the ship's captain is the one who ends up being the one who bonds with the dragon. And once a dragon bonds with you, that's it. You're kind of like, you kind of owe that dragon your service. It's really amazing. It's an excellent idea for a series or a movie. It was released in 2007, and I had heard in almost every year after like 2012 that they were considering it, that somebody had looked into the rights for it, that and nothing ever went anywhere. But I have really awesome news that I just discovered before our broadcast, and that is that in September of 2022, so now, not even in alternate history, it is reported that the novel will be adapted into an adult animated drama series at Fox. So that could be absolutely unbelievably exciting. And the fact that they're going to do it as an animated series means that they free up a lot of resources that are required to do the live action stuff with dragons. I mean, the CGI is incredibly expensive. And then sometimes we lose story elements because we're spending so much time and effort on the CG that it takes to create, the fantasy aspects. So animation totally works for me. I'm really excited about that. And yeah, so here's one of those. Did you ever play Go Fish? And ask somebody for Queen of Diamonds or whatever, and then they give you uh what not what you're looking for, and then you end up going, oh, okay, I gotta go into the pile, and then you find what you're looking for.
Got your
This
wish.
is my fish what I wish moment right now. Yes. It's my number 1, and I just found out that it's actually going to be adapted into an actual animated series. So, yay!
So let's hope it's good.
I seriously hope so. So, I'm super excited to hear what your number 1 is.
My number one is it showed promise for decades to being adapted, but it never has been. The rights have been kind of kicked around a few times, and if I'm not mistaken, New Line has them now. A big company from New Line would be a good fit for this story, but nothing has been announced on it in 3 years. 3 years. It said they had a director attached to it, and nothing. Looked at the director's page, nothing. But it is possibly one of my favorite stories ever, period. but it's for sure my favorite story that's never been adapted in any medium. I am talking about Stephen King as Richard Bachman with
Oh,
The Long Walk.
another Stephen King.
Yeah, yeah, The Long Walk. I want to see The Long Walk.
Oh, hey.
I know. The title, not exactly sexy, right? But it is what it's about. It's a long walk. The thing is, imagine you take a battle royale and make it about walking. And if you say slow down, you get warned. And if you get warned 3 times, bam, they shoot you in the face. Now, I want to say something
It's the
like
Running Man, but it's walking.
yeah, that's a good way to put it. And much like road work, it's more about diving deep into the characters and these guys who are promised literally anything in the world if they are the last one standing. And it follows mostly Ray Garrity, the as they say Maine's own, as they walk through you know the miles and miles of Maine's miles and miles. Doesn't have a lot of action, no. But for me, the story found a way deep into my head as it focuses on how people going through what's essentially a collective trauma come out the other end, even though only one will. It's a struggle to live, and sometimes it's just finding it in you to die.
It's interesting because this all sort of works on a theme, the Stephen King stories that you chose. And I feel like Stephen King tried to culminate a bunch of the stories that you just talked about, in your list for adaptations to movies in The Stand. And it wasn't like faithful to all of them, but they all incorporate little aspects of those Bachman books into something that was, I think, bigger and wider and greater. But as a result, those little stories sort of like got lost in the bigger, more complex retelling of some of them. And as a result, they lost what made each one of them unique and good. So I actually think that that would be a very worthy adaptation. Very worthy.
Would you like to hear who I have attached to it?
Yeah.
Well, I'll go with the stars first. I think it needs someone solid to anchor it as Ray, so I chose Tom Holland. Just he's just kind of a dude, just walking. He's not the walking dude. That's a different guy.
Right.
Um, as the main antagonist, I picked Tyler Dichiara. Probably most notable from Relish, which I keep telling you to watch. And he's going to be in Gotham Knights because I'm hearing that is actually getting some traction as far as shooting again. I thought it was canceled. And as Pete, the reluctant hero, I guess, the guy that saves Ray's butt a couple times, I was thinking Ashton Sanders from Moonlight.
Ooh, that's a good one.
A guy that can really express uh, a wide range a wide array of emotions as far as deciding to help this guy who was actually his direct competition. And directing, there's only one guy that came to my mind. And this guy actually had the rights for a while, but didn't do anything with it. So if I get the rights, I'm going to bring him back because he had an idea and I want to see it play out. Plus, when it comes to King's work, this guy is the best at it. Frank Darabont.
That sounds good. That sounds really good. I have to say that well, it didn't make it to my list because again, I found out during Stranger Things of all places. There's an episode in Stranger Things where he at the very end is reading a book to the in the hospital his in the hospital girlfriend, and the book that he's reading is called The Talisman. And it was a co written endeavor by Stephen King and a man named Peter Strauss. Peter Strauss is a legendary writer who did Ghost Story. He's absolutely brilliant as a writer. And I have always been excited to see that become manifest in any visual form. I mean, it's just such an exciting story for me. And I found out during Stranger Things that, oh, hey, guess what? They are making that into a movie. So, if you're a Stephen King fan, I also just found out that that another book, the most recent short story anthology, is there's a story in it that's called Mr. Somebody's Phone. That is being adapted into an actual story as well, and that is super good. So if you're a fan of a Stephen King story, you've got a really good chance in your lifetime of seeing his movies. I mean, his stories put into a movie, even if they are really old. I think you still have a pretty good chance because The Talisman is like 30 something years old.
Mm-hmm.
So don't lose hope, Josh. There's hope. That was the point. There's hope.
I want the long walk so bad. It got to the point where I watched this. This, no offense to the guys that made it, but it was not good. But they probably had like 75-cent budget. These guys just put together a trailer for the long walk. Just a bunch of buddies getting together, used, I'm assuming, their phone and just made a little trailer for what could be the long walk. Again, not good, but at least they did something. It reminds me of back before, Hamilton was on Disney Plus, where I had not seen anything as far as performance goes. I actually found some high school footage of them performing Hamilton. I'm like,
oh my God.
This is the closest I'm going to get. But then they're like, we have a movie coming on Disney Plus. I'm like, yes, okay, I can chill out.
Crazy.
But those are our lists.
I will recap my list real fast, just so that it's clear, because we have covered a lot of ground.
Mm-hmm.
My number 10 is In the Name of the King, A Dragon Siege Tale. That's the Dungeons and Dragons one. Master and Commander is my number 9, Far Side of the World. Number 8, Lights Out. Hopefully that could be better. Number 7, Highlander 2, The Quickening. Number 6, Cloverfield. Hopefully, I'm sorry. That was Cloverfield. Number 5, The Lye Tree, which is the original story by Francis Hardinge. That is the book that I am really hoping gets made into a movie and that I made Josh buy during the podcast. Number 4 was Treasure Island. Something more authentic, please. Number 3 was my very own story called The Mythology Club. Number 2 was Dun Dun, The Hobbit. Yes, even I have issues with adaptations of Tolkien. And number 1, His Majesty's Dragon. Can't wait to see that one as the animated series that apparently it's already going to be. So that was my list.
And my list, starting at number 10, The Indian in the Cupboard. Number 9, Sphere. Number 8, Maniac McGee. Number 7, The Weston Game. Number 6, Losing Joe's Place. Number 5, Please Stick to the Source Material, The Running Man. Number 4, Roadwork. Number 3, Cheating Death, Stealing Life, The Eddie Guerrero Story. Number 2, We Traded Southern Victory for Alien Lizards Attacking during World War II.
Alien Lizards, yes.
I think that might have been a good call. Steven Spielberg, either way. Can't go wrong. And finally, my number 1, The Long Walk. And you will hear me talk about this being my most wanted thing to be made until they actually make it. And they better make it good. Otherwise, I'm going to start restating that I want it to be done well now.
We're going to have to put you on an episode of The Running Man if you don't do it well, so please do it well.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed. Well, this was a really good list. This was a great list. I'm really excited about it. So our next week, in maybe sort of a return to form, and obviously as sort of overstated by many of my choices in some of my content, we are going to be talking about the naval. What's a good way to say this? Stories. No, not that naval. Different naval. We're going to talk about stories that take. We'll just say stories that take place at sea. Never mind. You don't have to be in the military. Stories that take place at sea. So if a movie takes place at sea, let's hear what our top 10 choices of those are. The only caveat is no. There is no caveat. Just if it's at sea, it's at sea.
Can it be at ocean?
I think ocean and sea are synonymous enough that it would work. However, if the story takes place on a lake, I'd probably say no. That's probably not going to do it. It needs to be the wide open, expanse. But I mean, if it takes place in the Caspian Sea instead of the Atlantic Ocean, I'm okay with that. It's fine.
Okay, writing that down. Movies on big water, not small.
If you can find a movie that takes place on the Caspian Sea, I'd like to also know that, because I don't think I do know one that takes place there. Not sure.
I'll see if I can go back for that interesting bit of trivia next week. Just to impress you, Jen.
I feel like this could actually be a really good one, because stories that take place on the ocean are about as varied as the different zones of the ocean itself. I mean, you have everything from, Titanic to A Perfect Storm, and, there's a million choices, just a million choices.
I look forward to that.
All right. Well, we will see you next week. You can find me at moviesandmeals.com, and you can find me on Thursday evenings on our podcast TV Dinners and the Movie Potluck. Hopefully this week we're going to be talking about Sex in the Series. And boy, do I have some good stuff to go through this week, based on some interesting news that came out of House of Dragon. So this should be a good conversation. Let's see what happens.
And on Friday, we're going to be coming back with podcast episode number 104. What's it going to be about? Hell if I know.
Something interesting for sure.
It will definitely be something interesting as it relates to writers, actors, and directors, because that's what the podcast is all about. So, thank you, Jen. Your list was amazing.
Josh. So was yours. This was really fun.
I think we could really hear the passion about the things that we had on our list tonight.
Yeah, very much so. It was a good list. Very good list.
So until next week, I guess I need to sign off for this show.
This is goodbye.